Welcome back to In Light of the Gospel, episode 59. My name is Dan Blatz. Today I'll be talking with Henry Friesen. He's a local young man here who's got a tire business that he runs, owns and operates. That's how I got to know him. And he's got a real passion for the gospel and reaching people with it. He's another one of the men in our area who has been heavily influenced by, or impacted by is probably a better word, by the men's encounter. He was an old colony man like many of the rest of us here listening, and going along his way, trying his best to be a good man, and realizing slowly that he had a need. And when he went to the men's encounter, the gospel finally came clear. He said he spent many years at the foot of the cross, kind of looking for the truth in it, examining it. It reminds me of that old song, "When I survey the wondrous cross on which the Prince of Glory died." He was examining it, looking at it, trying to do the right thing, trying to be a good old colony man. And then finally, at the men's encounter, things fell into place, and he realized what Christ had done for him. So tune in, and appreciate you tagging along. I hope that you share the video with somebody that needs it, and God bless you.
For myself personally, when I hear someone's testimony and it sounds like they never really were that bad, or even now
Never
in the church or in the faith, it seems as though they have everything all together and they're always just nitpicking on other people's little things, then it's kind of hard to connect to somebody, especially if you're going through hardships.
Yep.
And we often go through what truly is hardships is what's in the heart, right? Like what's deep down inside, and we think maybe nobody knows or whatever. You can't. For myself anyways, I've been at times where, there's maybe been people that could see I was stressed out, or I was
letting things get to you.
I was letting things get to me, and they try to help, but I can't let somebody try to help me if it seems like they've never had problems, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody that's always been putting on a front that they have it all together, that life is just easy, and
that's
trials are nothing. You just flick them off, and and like there's just nothing to it. I mean, for me, it's always hard if you don't get to, if I can't talk to somebody and they'll say they've been there, right? Mm-hmm. And whatever.
That's one of the reasons we appreciate Christ so much, right? Is he went through all the struggles that we went through, tempted in every point like as we are. And for me, that's one of the big things about this podcast platform that I've really, really enjoyed. Two things. One is that you get to hear somebody's actual thoughts come out. They're not pre-rehearsed. They're not formulated. They're not written down. And that's difficult. Some people are very, very wary of that.
My wife asked me if I was going to, what I needed to do to prepare or anything. I was like, it's not about me anyways, because my initial thoughts were like, I don't know, Dan, why are you asking me right now? I feel like I am often so much under attack, like from every angle, financially, and with just not being quite able to divide my time effectively, and like just always feeling a kind of a day late and a dollar short. And then you think somebody needs to hear something and you say it, and then maybe they feel, it seems that you hurt somebody by saying something you really felt like you need to say. And then it's like, okay, well, next time you don't say something, and then you kick yourself for it because
why didn't I say something?
Why didn't I say it? I had it and it could have helped them, but I didn't say anything. And then, okay, well, next time when I feel that, that nudge from the Spirit, I can't hold back, right? Because there's people that ministered to me, that opened my eyes to what Christ had really done for me, to fully understand it. There's people that would risk hurting my feelings or whatever to tell me not what I wanted to hear, but what I needed to hear.
What they felt you needed to hear.
Yeah. So there's people that did that, and, at the right time, I think there's many a time somebody would have ministered to me that my feelings would have been rather hurt, or I would have had maybe a sense of bitterness towards somebody for, they think they're all that, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what are you talking about?
So the podcast platform lets people see, like, hey, this guy's actually not perfect. He's just thinking out loud and he's talking. Yeah. But I do have something to offer. For all my struggles, for all my difficulties, and for all of your struggles and issues, there is something that you've come to that has alleviated the main problem. The main problem is I have no hope for my soul. Now you have hope. Even though you're still struggling through life and trying to find different answers and stuff, the one main problem has been solved, and that's Christ and him crucified, right? Yeah. And so the other thing was, you mentioned that a lot of people now who maybe used to struggle to learn by reading, they didn't like reading very much. Now there's millions of men especially tuning into podcasts and listening to hours of very good information that they would never consume if it was in a book. So I think the podcast platform is very good that way.
Yeah. I know for myself, it becomes a bit of an issue because I have a hard time getting myself to sit down and read.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm trying to learn something that pertains to, I mean, as far as the Word of God, it also pertains to everyday life, but just to practical, I need information on something. I've got something new coming at work or whatever, and I need to do a little bit of research on buying a tool or equipment or whatever. I have no problem having the kids running around screaming and just being children while watching a YouTube on it or reading an article or a description on that. I have no problem with that. But where I always fall under attack is when I have the Bible out in front of me and the kids are doing that. I just can't focus. I feel like that is something when it's time for me to sit down and read. That's where I always fall heavily under attack. I feel like I find for that reason, it's nice to have the same kind of motivation that you have when you're watching a YouTube video for your business. Yeah. If you're looking at like, I need to know this topic, I need to understand this passage because I'm presenting it, or I'm sharing it with somebody, or somebody asked a question, I've got to have an answer. Then you can have that same kind of laser focus attitude towards the scripture. That is something that I really hope is coming. That I'll be able to get more to that, where I can have kind of a tunnel vision and just lock out everything else. It comes and goes, right? It does, yeah. And some guys get so focused. Like I know one guy that I used to know really well. He couldn't not focus. So he'd be so laser focused on studying, and he'd study 5, 6, 7 hours a day to the neglect of his wife and kids, right? And so you don't want to be that, constantly caught up in study that you can't just be a dad and a husband, right? So. Yeah, I feel like for me, I'm on the opposite side of the spectrum. So there needs to be a good. Put me in touch with this guy, and we'll do some trading. Maybe we'll be the winners. Yeah, I envied his ability to study. That's for sure. So yeah. Hey, were you born and raised around here, or in Mexico somewhere, or where were you from? Born in Tillsonburg. Oh yeah, I'm the oldest of 10 kids. Okay. Yeah, there's 9 that are younger than me. So I'm 30 now. My youngest brother is just turned 11. I see. Yeah. A nice 20-year gap, just about? Just about, yeah. Yeah. Just about a 20-year gap. Oldest of 11, you said? Or 10? Oldest of 10. Oldest of 10. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you've had a lot of people looking up to you for a long time. I feel like I often catch myself being quick to give advice and in being somebody that often people would come to. So I feel like I get it a lot that people would ask me for advice. There is something on certain things psychologically different about an oldest child in most families, right? There's a different kind of pressure on them. Yep, I know for my parents both, they can read. My dad's reading is a little bit slow, and not just that, but it seems like any meetings or if he's got a bank appointment or anything like that, always seems like he needs somebody to say it to him in plain English or in Deech, right? Yeah. Did you grow up then speaking mostly Deech or English? Deech was very, very common, very popular. Yeah? Even though you were born and raised in Canada? Yeah, Deech has never been an issue. You've probably heard me try to speak Deech a little bit now, and I'm okay. I can get by. I can have a conversation. Yeah. But it's not my natural language. Like I can't really fully express myself because the words are just not quite there. Right? Yeah. Well, the other day when you text me and asked if I would be willing to come on and share my story, my initial reaction was, "You want to do it in Deech?" Oh yeah, that'd be interesting. I've thought about even getting more of the German videos and then maybe just start a separate German channel even, right? Because a lot of people that tune in are not Plattdeutsch, and then it's hard to put them all out there. But yeah. So you would be as comfortable in Deech as in English? Probably. Yeah? Probably. Yeah. Even if you were to speak, share your testimony, anything like that, German? Yeah, I'd have no problem. Okay. Yeah. I
That's
guess
cool.
one thing that we've been quite involved in, my wife and I both, is the men's encounter and women's encounter
Yep.
ministry.
And there's a lot of teaching that
So
comes to that.
yeah, we've been quite involved with that. And last time that I did serve there was this past fall, and so I did some translating there.
Okay.
When there's a teaching or testimony going on in English, that I would translate to Plotich.
Right on.
Uh,
Yeah, like I said, I've said many times before, I was born and raised here, never really had to speak German.
Yeah.
Growing up, my parents could understand English fine because I had several older brothers and they were all
Okay,
raised
yeah.
here too.
Yeah.
And so now it was like I only had to speak German when my cousins from Mexico came. And then I just barely spoke enough to get by, and that was it. And so now I really want to get better at it. And so when I went on to Benny and Renee's show, I kind of stumbled my way through, and then I interviewed this Yearhart Fair from Bolivia and let him do most of the talking, and
Yeah.
we're pretty good. But now I'm reading Plot Beach too, and it seems to be coming better and better. We'll see where it
Yeah,
goes.
with reading it always does. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's for sure. Yeah.
So you never did live in Mexico?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Yeah. So my early childhood, we would have a few times gone to Mexico just for a couple weeks as a visit over the Christmas holidays, and
Yep.
then I must have been about 6 years old when my parents bought their property there.
Okay.
And then it took another few years. I think it's usually like a 3 or 4 year payment plan that you got to hammer down and pay it off. It's just a handshake deal, right? And
Okay.
you put a deposit on, and then you make annual payments for 3 years. So that prohibited us from going back there because you had to save every penny and
I
send it off,
see.
right? So, yeah. Yeah, we grew up living in house trailers and bunk houses around here, and
Just work.
work. Yeah. 9 years old, the first time we went actually as a family to spend the winter there
Okay.
in Mexico, in Durango, Mexico.
What this?
Otis,
Yeah.
yep. Yeah, so I was 9 the first time we went to actually spend the winter there.
Yeah.
We started with some cows and just kind of the hobby farm thing, a little
But
bit
your
of.
dad really wanted to get back to Mexico.
Oh, he wanted to get back to Mexico. I think his heart would still be in Mexico. I mean, it kind of is. That's what in hot tea says. Like he's definitely he would like to go back.
I see.
There was a bit of I guess when I turned 16 was the last time that we went as a family together.
So
And,
from 9 till 16, you were in Mexico
was-
as much or more than here.
just
or
about
kinda
as
on
much
and
as
off, yeah.
here, yeah. Probably
Okay.
average 5 months.
So you
throughout the
never
winter.
did go there and move full time. It was always a back and forth.
It was, yeah, about 6 months is the longest we were ever there. And so, yeah, I went to the old colony school in the village there for the last 4 winters that would have been of school age. So
Okay.
from 9, 10, 11, 12, kind of.
Yeah.
And
So that would have helped with speaking German quite a bit too, obviously.
um,
But your family always spoke Dutch anyway.
yeah, my family always spoke Dutch anyway. So in a way, I felt like we had kind of an advantage because the way Dutch is taught here in Canada, even just from Sunday school, like I grew up going to Tilsonburg Old Colony.
Yep.
And just from Sunday school there, what we learned in 1 hour a week, it seemed like just proper pronunciation and everything was just a lot more fluent and more proper, more correct than
Here or there?
here.
Really?
So even the little bit of, I mean, I guess I can't speak for everybody, but for those of us that would come there and spend the winters in school there, like I started at 9 years old, and I could probably after my first 4 month of school there, I could outread anybody
Really?
in my age group, in my grade, kind of.
Interesting.
And as far as understanding went, those of us coming from Canada and spending winter seasons in the Darpshire there, we would always have an edge on understanding. It seemed
Interesting.
like, because there it was very much about memorizing, right? You learn the catechism, you do the first half one morning, and the second half the next morning,
I see.
and it's every morning
Just
first thing, and
repeat. You just put it out of your mind and just say the words, eh?
yeah, you just rip through it however fast you can, right? And
Interesting.
it makes it tough for people to learn to read in a way because you've burned it into your memory, and you might have been saying it wrong the whole time, and then you're trying to read it, and sometimes I think they're often a ways into reading a certain, let's say, a verse out of the catechism, and it doesn't make sense. Some of the words jive, but some don't, because you might have been saying them wrong because you start repeating in the chorus, like with that ever since you start going to school. You can't read at all. You're 6 years old, I think, where you start school there. So you start Verkissen Abzeichen at that age already, when you can't even read anything.
Interesting.
And so you're memorizing it before you can read, and then when they try to learn to read, I think that often hinders a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's so much about memory, and I used to not like it. I kind of despised the idea of just having to memorize everything when they couldn't understand it.
Yeah.
But a lot of the things that I have memorized from there, I mean, I probably can't.
They're still in your mind, eh?
Can't rhyme it all out now the way I would have, 20 years ago. But a lot of times now, when I'm going through something, or I've got a thought process on my mind, and all of a sudden this verse from a catechism or something like that pops in there in High German.
That's right.
And it's like, now, if only the people could understand this. If only the people could understand this. Like, it'll come back to me. It's like it'll just jump out. See,
we've heard this
is
our whole lives.
A 20-year-old file in my brain, and all of a sudden it unlocks, right?
Yep.
And something just pops out. I'm thinking in English.
Yep.
And it's 20 years after that. And now
suddenly
that just
a thought in High German comes to your mind.
each memory verse or something pops out, and it just connects, and it's like, wow.
I've heard of people who do that with the Bible. Like a guy up the road that lives up the road here, he has several books of the Bible memorized in English.
Yeah.
But he memorized them one time. He could have, for a contest, could have repeated the whole book of Romans. Now he probably forgets a lot of it, but it's always there, right? It's fresh in his mind, and he can recollect it very quickly.
That's like not being able to sing an old song, but when it comes on
suddenly
you can sing every word along with it, right?
Yeah.
You might not be able to pull it off yourself, but when it's playing, and I know.
So when you grew up, then Old Colony here and there, kind of back and forth, was it? Did it just feel like religion to you, or was God personal to you pretty early on?
Not necessarily that God was very personally to me.
It was more just a religious feeling that you got, or?
Well, it's what we knew, right?
Yeah.
It's what we knew. I mean,
would you say that you tried to be good, or were you just kind of reckless and a little bit disobedient and didn't really care? Say at 9 or 12, 13, that age.
That age, like the preteen years. I would have been more probably. I think my brother Pete, he's just about a year younger than me. He would have been a lot more the quiet one, the reserved one.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of, he would follow along, but at a distance, right? He got himself into a lot less trouble, I think, than I would have. If ever he would have got something, it would have been because I would have been like,
"You instigated
Mom,
something."
you said, right? This is what you said," and I would make sure that if I had something to get that you promised I would get it, I would demand it, right? I would be very demanding that.
How about things like going to bed at night? Did you fear God, or was it?
I'm not sure at that age, but getting a little bit older, it was. I feel like it was a very routine thing. I got a little bit wild too into the youth years. So.
Okay. And you knew it, your rebellion or your wildness was an affront to God, that God wasn't happy with the way you're living.
Oh yeah, I was definitely aware of it. It was not something that I would not have been aware of. Or that
it's hard to really put your finger on exactly, right? Because on one hand, you might just be like, I don't want to get in trouble. I know we shouldn't do this. It's not a good thing.
Well,
but then some people have a genuine terror from God, like God's going to come after me, right?
Yeah. I think in my case, it would have been more like, we'll clean it all up yet one day, right?
Okay.
You just kind of in the hopes that you're going to live past your youth, and like in Plotich they would say utoben.
Yeah.
They want to
sow your wild oats quickly, and then
exactly, and then yeah, you have like a certain amount of it's like you have a tank of bad gas and you gotta spend it all.
Get it out.
Like get it out once so that you don't have, don't start filling up on new fuel, because
That's right.
one rotten apple would spoil the whole barrel.
First, I'll have a bunch of fun.
have a
Maybe
bunch of fun,
get
and
married, and then
yeah,
we'll
have a whole
settle down.
bunch of fun, and finish having your fun.
Yeah. That's too
being-
bad that it's painted that way in our minds. I don't know where it comes from,
Yeah.
but you can have a whole lot of fun and pleasure while also being good and righteous and following God, right? Or even more fun.
Yeah,
The other stuff is still
there's
fleeting.
there's an unspeakable joy in just being God's for service, right?
That's right.
There's even sometimes when it hurts that you've said something or done something and you feel bad about maybe having convicted someone, or said something that's a hard truth. I know that's I feel like I catch myself still often being a bit quick to speak.
Yeah. So you spent your teenage years up to 16 back and forth to Mexico and Canada, and a little bit rebellious. Then what kind of transpires? How do you come to faith, or is that much later?
That wouldn't be until several years later yet. But yeah,
Okay.
had some wild times. I mean, we didn't get into big trouble. I mean, anything is as bad as anything else, it seems like. But we used to drive very stupid.
Okay.
A group of guys, we would drive stupid, and
Now you realize how dangerous it was.
yeah, it's I realize now how dangerous it was and how many times over I should have been dead just for how we used to drive. I did get into an accident once. I had a skull fracture and things like that. That took me
Bit of a wake-up call?
It definitely was a wake-up call. I would have been just before I turned 20, I believe.
Okay.
So 2013 in June.
So it was a pretty big accident.
Yeah, before that, I had a broken arm. I rolled a four-wheeler, and yeah, that broke my arm, and I had my little brother with me, and he also was in the hospital for a few days. He had a cracked spleen and some pretty bad rash, like scrapes and stuff like that. But I've definitely had some things that came my way that were wake-up calls.
Okay. Did you meet your wife at Old Colony too then?
Yes.
How long have you guys been married? I don't know that much about it.
We coming up on 10 years this fall.
Okay. So you're married around 20 years old as well?
21.
21.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Got married at 21. Went through the whole Old Colony Baptism Wednesday school and all that. I think you're from the same.
Yep.
Went through all the same things, and you make your confessions, and
the general feeling is that you do it to get married, in a sense. Like you shouldn't get married until you're baptized, and so now we're thinking about marriage. Maybe we should get baptized. Maybe we should change our lives. Our wild oats have been sown. Maybe it's time to clean things up, and so you change. You try to change your perspective a little bit.
Yeah.
And we tried to do it very seriously. My wife and I were like, we're not going to do it just to get married. We're getting married, but we want to really change, right?
Yeah, so I know we talked about, and I made sure that we would talk about this first, that we would talk about whether or not we wanted to join the church and get baptized and such, take up membership and, be able to take part in communion and everything else that the church life has to offer, right?
Yep.
So we knew we wanted to do that, and so we needed to commit to whether or not we were going to go through the whole Wednesday school, the baptism classes and all that. And we had pretty well decided that we were going to do that. And then right over that time we got engaged as well, and that just kind of that settled it. It's like, we are getting baptized not to get married, but it's kind of like, since we're getting baptized anyway, then why would we not get married? Because we started dating when we were pretty young. My wife was 15 and I was 17.
Okay.
And so we had dated just over 4 years by the time we got married.
Gotcha. So it was high time.
It was high time. It was high time.
Yeah.
It's a long time to date. with the trials that come.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, so we joined the church, and
As far as the gospel was concerned, there was not much understanding yet about.
neither of us. I mean, we were as close to being saved, I think, as you could get without being saved, right? Which is as far away as you can be, right?
Interesting statement.
It was
so close and yet so far.
exactly so far away. There was I don't know, I did feel a sense of peace after my baptism. I had made all the major confessions I needed to make, and
well, even people who go to a psychologist or a therapist, they sense that too, right? Where they're like, I just finally got everything off my chest. I feel clear. I think I've done everything I should do. And there's this sense of peace, right?
Yeah. No, I for sure thought I had really, really felt, God's presence at the baptism and everything. I just felt like this was really going to be easy now, right?
And you were doing the right thing.
We were doing the right thing.
God, right?
It was going to be easy. We were doing the right thing. So I had a past in my youth with pornography and things like that too, and that was, I'd come clean.
Yeah. That feels right.
And it just feels right. You're in a circle of other church people, or whatever I guess you could call it, and you would think that surrounding with those people, cutting off from your old friends and so on, at least the ones that were not moving on, also joining a church elsewhere, that would help, and it would fix things. Getting married would help too, and which it all helped
to a point, right?
But it didn't. It's like it helps, but it doesn't cure, it doesn't fix, right?
Yeah. So what we need as humanity is to be made new, where religion is like a fix-up, right?
Yeah.
You take your car to the shop and get a new fender put on, and you get the manifolds fixed and that kind of thing.
Get it all painted up really nice.
Whereas coming to Christ is, okay, let's get rid of this old thing. Let's start over brand new. Let's give
that we are dead to sin, right? That we are dead to sin and alive unto Christ. That the only thing alive in us is now Christ, right?
Amen.
But yeah, I guess I made myself as better or as good as I could to fit in, and I met the criteria, and so yeah, we got married November 2014.
So it'll be 10 years coming up.
Yep. We had I was very serious about my church life. I would never miss a meeting. There was monthly meetings on Saturday nights. Never miss a meeting. Anything that there was, if there was weddings, funerals, I often got asked to help because I was willing, right? If they found someone willing to help, they would always put you on the spot. Okay, you want to be like a parking usher, or you want to help with this or help with that. My parents were kind of well known in the church too, and they would often also help out. So then I got asked to teach Sunday school.
Okay.
So we started teaching Sunday school. My wife and I did together for 3 years. And over that time we had a miscarriage, and then we had our firstborn. We've had I think we had another miscarriage after that.
Oh boy. Those are some tough trials.
Yeah, we had one stillborn that was at I believe at 24 weeks.
Oh my.
We have 3 children now. My oldest is 7. Second one is will be 6 shortly. But our youngest is almost 2 now.
Those first 3 years, all of those passed away? Like you said, a miscarriage and a stillborn?
I think two miscarriages and 1 stillborn, and we have 3 now.
Yeah.
We have 3
after those. Okay. So those first 3 years were tough years.
Yeah, the first few years, I mean, there was some tough times. I had a hard time, I guess, being emotional support to my wife. It was a lot harder for her. The bond and the connection to the miscarriage and to the stillbirth was it tore her to pieces a lot more than it did me.
Whereas for a man, there is a connection because it's your wife and it's your potential baby or your future baby, or even it's your baby already in the womb. But for her, there's actually emotions and hormones tied to it, and there's this
Exactly.
immediate love.
Yeah.
Where for us, often the love begins at the moment of birth, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, there's my
Yeah.
baby, right?
Yeah, finally I have one now, right? So
Yeah, so
she's
she
had it.
struggled.
She's had it for a while, and now finally I get to share it with
That's
her, right?
right. So she really struggled through those first few years.
Yeah, she's definitely been through a lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah,
So you're teaching Sunday school for 3 years, you said?
teaching Sunday school for 3 years. Very involved. Like never miss a Sunday. Never miss this. Very, very serious and adamant about my tithing and about all the good works, right?
Yeah.
It was definitely, looking back now, it was
pretty dedicated.
Yeah, I was very dedicated, putting my filthy rags in everywhere. So
I see. For me, it was a little bit less length of time, where I got baptized at 19, got married at 19 later that year, and then the old colony had a church split when I was 21, I think. So
Okay.
we were only members going to communion and fuibaretunk and all that for the first couple years of our marriage. Then there was the split. And then,
Okay.
but I was very dedicated as well. I'd give 10% of my money. I always showed up, went to the brothers meetings and stuff like that. But I didn't have enough time to get very involved. So
okay, so yeah, I guess we got kind of sucked into all of it.
Yeah.
And it
but
was
it was
good.
the right
Like
thing to do, right? Like
it was the rightest thing to do that you know how to do, right? So
Yeah.
over that time that we were getting married, or I think we must have just gotten married, and then the old colony church bought a building in Cortland.
Oh yeah.
And so I spent so many hours there. I'd get up at 4 in the morning and then rush off to my work at Stubby's, start at 5 in the morning, work till 4 or 5, and then sometimes even just on the way home I would stop in there and help out, work for a couple hours, volunteer just to help with the renovations of that building. That was a Catholic church, and there was so much work that had to be done. Basically rebuilding, gutting and redoing the whole entire interior.
Yeah.
The windows and everything. So I spent a lot of Saturdays and evenings there. A lot of sacrifice that I made.
So you're fully dedicated to all the services. And whenever there's a service there, you're there.
Yeah.
You're teaching Sunday school, and you're spending a lot of your after hours time of work after work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was hard on my wife because she would sometimes come there then, I believe, and or she would just have to wait for me because I was doing good things, right? And she wanted me to know that I had her support, but it was hard on her.
Yeah.
It was hard on her that I was away so much for work and for all these other things. So it's definitely something for her to try and get used to. That I always have to be doing something that's I guess kind of part of my personality. Even when I'm relaxing, I feel like
I got to do something.
I have to be doing something, right? And enjoying something for myself, or seeing if somebody else needs something or whatever. It's not that I'm always productive, that I'm always making a product or that it's fruitful, but I can't just sit idle somewhere. There's people that can just sit on the couch and stare out the window and watch the rain for 3 hours, and they're just loving it, right? But for me, there's always got to be something, has to be moving or doing, right? Music on or something. Right?
So these years of trial at home with your wife and the babies and the Sunday school and all the extra hours at Cortland and stuff like that, that kind of build towards something where it was a bigger moment, or you just kind of went through it and.
Well, we found ourselves leaning towards the Cortland church when that was finally going to be open and running. We wanted to attend there. We wanted to transfer our membership to there because there was a lot of younger couples that were kind of stepping into that. So it was the young men that had ambition. And
did it feel like there was going to be a bit of change?
It felt like it was going to advance a little bit. There was going to be definitely, it was going to be more lively, more open, a little bit more advanced. So we definitely wanted to be part of that, and that was actually the Sunday school principal from Tilsonburg Church came and sought me out at a Cortland meeting because he found out that we had planned to go there, and he comes to a Cortland meeting. He's like, Henry, we need you to come and help teach Sunday school with us in Tilsonburg. And I said, but we had already paid our fees, our annual fees for the Cortland church, because that was going to be opening soon and whatever. And he goes, yeah, but we really need you to. And well, it was a service that we could do for God, right? So like I couldn't talk myself out of it. So we ended up teaching it. Oftentimes we would teach one Sunday at Tilsonburg, and then we would go and attend church in Cortland the next Sunday, and it was back and forth like that. We were kind of between, and transferred our membership back and forth a little bit too because of that. And yeah, eventually it was just kind of too much for us to. We had 2 kids, and it was kind of hard to be attentive with Sunday school, and we also I wanted to be able to try, and I felt like I needed to be every Sunday in church for a while, also for training the boys to sit quiet and behave. If it was every other week, then for them it was easy to just make a fuss, and then you'd walk them outside because you have to sit quiet, right? All that came about. I remember a few years into our marriage, where my wife got saved. She was going through some very hard times, and she's got an uncle that she didn't have a hard time to connect with, and she'd had some questions for him in the past already, and
he was a believer, understood the gospel.
He was a believer. He came from the same background as us, and he was a believer, and she trusted him, I guess, and she shared some things with him, and he pointed her to some scriptures, and also, I guess, gave her some methods for prayer and other things. And so when she found that, I remember coming home from work one day, and she just had this glow, this sense of joy, and like, what's gotten into you? Because she asked me about things before, but it seemed like she had a bigger understanding than I did. So I had nothing to offer, right? She had an edge on me in terms of this. I had nothing to offer, nothing to give her for help, and so she goes, I've got it figured out now. I've got it figured out now. It finally dawned on her that you had to just trust. Just believe. And it's like, oh, that's good, right? Because she had talked about this a little bit in the recent past, and for me it was just like, oh, well, that's great, right? You've solved a problem now. It's been something that's been boggling your mind, and it was a lot more than that, but that's to the depth that I understood it, right?
Maybe now you can move on and be happy. So there's you didn't think right away, this is something I need to.
Oh, I think by that time I was aware that I needed it too, but I'm ek zie zelfs groot, ek zie the moon, right? I'll figure myself out eventually, right? And so that was already part of, I feel like, my years. I could say I spent years at the foot of the cross, with all my baggage, with everything, even though I had made confession and all that before baptism, but there was still just telling people about your past doesn't fix your past and doesn't pay for your past, right? Where I spent quite some time at the foot of the cross, and that was something that it just kind of struck too, and brings up the past on a whole new level again. And
this is really about 5 years ago only.
Her conversion, that would have been a bit longer ago. We must have been married about 3 or so years then, 3 or 4 years. And she was starting to be very convicted with going to take communion at the Old Colony Church. She's like, I just don't agree with, the lifestyle that some of these people live. There's some nice people there, and some people, like, for her, she could see people differently because she was
It was the
now
difference between saved and unsaved.
yeah, she could differentiate that a little bit more, and she saw how many people were doing these good works, but not leading good lives, and she's like, we can't. I cannot go and take communion with these people
Wow.
because they are not believers, right? Some of them are not believers, and we are called to take communion with um, those that are just like us in the faith, right?
They're also trusting in
That
the
that
one
also, yeah.
sacrifice.
So, yeah, she asked me every now and then. Like, I think she often wanted to talk to me about it more, but she would ask me, where do you stand in terms of salvation? Like, and I knew very well at that time that I was not saved. I knew where I was going with all my things. All I would ever tell her was that I was struggling with the assurance of salvation. I struggled with the fact that I was not saved, but I couldn't say that because I'm a man, right?
Yeah.
I can't say that I'm struggling with not knowing, or I can't say that I know where I'm going, because then I have to do something and I don't know what to do, right?
I see. For us, it was a major taboo thing. You could never say, I know that I'm saved, because that was like, how dare you? Are you saying then that you've done everything you need to do? You're good enough?
Yeah.
Right? Where it was a works mentality.
Yeah, definitely. So that works mentality was very deeply ingrained in me growing up. And so the one morning that it came around to, we were supposed to go to communion. We had went to Furberetung, we were supposed to go to communion, and she's like, I just can't go. I'm sorry, but I can't go because they want us to be in agreement with them to take part. And she says, then I can't take part because I might agree with the general message that's there. It's kind of vague, but I agree with the general message, but I don't, a lot of the people don't understand that. And so there's kind of two parties there, right?
Yeah.
And so she just couldn't go. And I was like, okay, well then let's not go. That's fine. Let's not go. So then we ended up visiting somewhere else.
A whole different
We
church.
just went to a different church that morning, and that was kind of an icebreaker thing for me. And the love and the unity, and not saying that other churches have it all together.
No, that's for sure.
I mean, we're all people and we all have very different views and opinions and all these things, but there was one thing common, right? That Christ reigned. And then you've had George Giesbrecht on here a few times.
Yeah.
I think once or twice anyways. I know we attended where they were attending at the time, and I really connected with him.
Okay.
I really connected with him. And one time he goes, hey, there's men's encounter coming up. I'm going to be serving there.
He was pretty
You want to go? You want to go to men's encounter? And I said, yeah, sure, sign me up.
Okay.
I had heard a little bit about it. I said, yeah, sure, sign me up. Let's do this, right? I was getting sick of being spiritually at odds with my wife, and also just being where I was. You wake up and you go to bed, and it's always on your mind that you got to do something about this. Like, I have to do something. I can't stay where I am.
Especially because you felt that there was this disconnect between you and your wife, where we're both Old Colony, but she knows something and feels something, understands something that I don't think I'm quite getting.
Yeah.
And so now you together are going somewhere else because she can't connect with these people. And yet you would kind of almost, in a sense, be in between, right? Where you're trying to be good, but you don't understand the gospel either. So
exactly, yeah.
And so George was pretty persuasive. He's quite passionate about the gospel.
He is. And yeah, I mean, when he asked me to go, and he asked a few others of us young guys there, he's like, I can see that you need something, and I think this would help you probably to make progress. Not
you were still Old Colony members?
We hadn't pulled membership yet, but we were visiting for some time already. We're still attending same place, but yeah, we were visiting for some time already. And so I went, and that was where that was where I felt like a veil was lifted from before my eyes, where I was actually able to understand what it meant to put your faith in Jesus. Like,
Okay.
Jesus was no stranger to us growing up either, because we had all the Bible storybooks and whatever else.
If somebody would have asked you, do you believe Jesus died for sinners? It would have been like, yeah, of
Oh,
course.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would have known that from young on, but that he's the only way, that your works are nothing right now. I believe very much in works now. I feel like there's a lot of people that, you say the sinner's prayer and then and you're good to go, right? You can continue in your lifestyle. You don't have to do much changing. It's just that, you confess Christ and you're good to roll now, right? You can enjoy life just the way you always have been before. I truly believe that a genuine, repentant heart that trusts in the Lord will bear good fruit.
For sure.
And the Bible says that we will know them by their fruit, right? So I feel like it's been a debated topic at times, where what if, a Christian is not bearing fruit? Well, I would say they are to be questioned to an extent, because the Bible says that they will bear fruit, right?
Yeah. Even Paul says to the Corinthians, I'm afraid for you, lest I have bestowed labor upon you in vain. Like, are you not genuine converts? Don't you know that Jesus Christ is in you, except you be reprobates? Like, test yourself, see whether you be in the faith.
Exactly.
Know you not your own selves? That kind of thinking, right? So,
yeah. So yeah,
what did you hear? Do you know in particular what it was at Men's Encounter that you heard that was like, that makes sense? Or was it just kind of the whole weekend?
I think it was the weekend as a whole.
But there's a heavy emphasis there on Christ's work, not your own works.
Christ's work, not your own work. There's a lot of testimonies there. And there was a lot of men that I could really relate to whose stories really related to me. And all of these came through, right? There was 100% success rate. It's not a testimony unless they've been where you are and they no longer are there, right? So, seeing the success rate, I guess, of testimonies over and over, and just like I was also brought to a different level of understanding of, the love of God. The love of God is, God's wrath is something that we all grew up being pretty aware of, right? But God's an angry, jealous God, and he's
for me, the idea of my sin was ever before me. It was like, okay, the ones I've confessed, they're forgiven. I can move on. I'm okay. But then it was like a day-to-day constant process of, I hope they're all forgiven. I hope they're all forgiven. Yeah. Whereas you go to something like that and you see this vivid image of, here's my sin. It was nailed to the cross. Now my sins are gone.
Yeah.
And to me, that was what opened my eyes. It wasn't at a Men's Encounter, but I heard the gospel preached in such a way where I recognized that, hey, if Christ actually became sin for me, and he took my sins and he was nailed to the cross and he went into the grave and he came back out, where's my sin?
Yeah.
It must have stayed down in the grave where it belongs. It must have been buried and defeated.
As far as the east is from the west, right?
And so when you see that finally, it's like, oh, I'm not going to church to get my sins forgiven.
Yeah.
Christ did something to get my sins forgiven. It's not about going to church.
Yeah.
Now I want to go to church. Now I want to do good works, but it's not because I need my sins forgiven.
Yeah.
It's because they are forgiven, right?
That's right.
Cart before the horse.
Exactly. That's how it is. I feel like the cart before the horse was definitely a story of my early 20s or into mid 20s or so.
So that was about 5 or 6 years ago now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In 2019, I went to fall of 2019.
So
I went to Men's
years.
Encounter for the first time. Just before COVID.
That was a big liberation for you then.
Yeah, definitely it was. And, I felt so much change there. I feel like my ways, or what was so deeply ingrained in me, had been really, really challenged there. And I remember coming home and my wife was just, she kept looking at me in this sense of awe. Like she was seeing somebody completely different than she had seen before. I mean, you get home Sunday evening, and Monday, obviously, you're off to work, and you come home, and she just sees something different. She sees someone different, right? And it must have been a few days into the week after, like, I wasn't quite sure. I felt like I had a very big revelation, but even then I was like, how dare I say that I got saved, or that I'm now born again, that I'm a child of God, that I'm, that I have eternal life. How dare I say that, right? My works will show it. That was kind of a thing in my mind. My works will show it. And it was about a few days, probably Tuesday or so, coming home from work. My wife goes, I just can't believe it. I said, can't believe what? That you are saved, that you are born again. It's like, who said I was born again? And she goes, your fruit is showing it, right? I see the fruit. She says, I see the fruit.
The countenance, everything.
She says, I see the fruit of regeneration, right?
The
that
level
she
of
sees
peace
that,
and joy and all that.
Yeah, she saw that. And obviously prayer and my hunger, my reading, and everything was just something completely different, right? I hadn't noticed the extent of the change over the weekend that I was gone. Like what really had all happened. It was kind of a whirlwind. My feet were hardly touching the ground, and it was just it was, for me, it was kind of an overwhelming thing. And that she was able to, a few days into knowing this new Henry that came home, tell me that I was born again, right? It was just something that put this.
It put a stamp on you almost.
Yeah,
like, hey,
it drove the final nail into the coffin, right?
For me, it took about a month. I was sharing my story with people, telling them what had happened and how I had come to this new understanding. And about a month later, I was like, I must have gotten saved. I didn't even know what that was or what that meant.
Yeah.
But I look back and I'm like, that moment right there, I can see it now. That's when I first started trusting.
Yeah. So that was really where I think we hit it off between my wife and I, that, she had been in the faith now for, I believe, 2 and some years.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on all of this, because I'm bad with dates and ages and all that stuff. But she would have been in the faith for a few years by herself, right?
Okay.
Without me.
Really fully understanding.
Without me being on her level, and she was worried about.
You weren't
me.
very yang on with it, like you weren't totally against her.
Oh no, I was not. I was very glad for her, but I often felt so bad that I couldn't be, a spiritual support to her, because she was born a bookworm, and so for her, if I was spent so much time away from home, you can guess what she was doing, right? She had an advantage on me already, and just how much time she had to grow. It's like she was continuously pulling away from me, pulling ahead. And even now, sometimes I feel like, because she was in the faith before me, I feel like I'm way behind as a mentor, as a leader in the home.
But there's more about being a leader than having knowledge, right? There's a lot of women who know more stuff than their husbands do, but their husband still leads well. And I think a wife can do that well by, like in the book of Peter, he says that they should submit, or how does it say, with a meek and quiet spirit. You can win your husband without a word, without the word being preached at him constantly, and you can honor him, and that will often raise him up.
She definitely was a version of God's grace towards me. She would, every now and then, when she just couldn't hold it in anymore, and we were out, usually when we're out on a drive, is where these conversations would have come up. And I spent a lot of time listening to audios. There's a couple of preachers that I was really fond of.
Which, do you mind sharing which ones?
One of them was Padafea.
Yeah.
From Mexico. You probably heard some of his stuff.
I don't think I have.
There was more. There was one, I believe he's from Germany. Andreas Lemkin was one.
More in Plotich then.
Yeah, Donald Neufeld is another one of them. We actually had him do evening services here not that long ago.
I see.
Yeah, they were pretty much all Plotich, and they really spoke to me, and I would listen to this stuff over and over and over and over again, and I was over and over and over guilty of my past and my sin, right? Over and over. And what really broke the guilt of sin was the love of God being put on display that I experienced at my weekend at Men's Encounter. That the love is really emphasized. The love of God is very much emphasized there. I just heard someone even the other day talking about the same thing. He's like, I had people witness to me over and over and over again, and like I knew that I was gonna die in my sins if I didn't change. That I knew that I was sinful and all these things. I knew that very well. I knew that very well. I didn't need that reminder. But then one day I heard someone emphasize on the love of God, and that was what struck. That was what struck. The love of God that is willing to take the punishment for your sins and give you eternal life simply for trusting and abiding in it, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, we kind of coming up on an hour, which doesn't matter to me too much if we go longer, but there's a few other things that I was hoping to kind of get to. I know you've done several outreach type of ministries then, and since then you've been to some different countries, Africa and some other places, I think? Or is it mostly just Africa?
Just Africa,
okay.
Yeah. Last year in February, I was out to Africa.
Right, I remember talking to you a bit about that in Elmer the one time.
Yeah.
And that's so that kind of ministry is something that's on your heart, something outreach.
I really felt a strong calling to go out and scope it out, and I think God was working on me a lot more than He was trying to work on through me on them. Okay. I think God added more to me than He did to Kenya. Like I do have a heart for the people there.
It so often is that way, though, when you do something.
Some of my best friends I've known for a week or two, and they're there. I'm still in touch with them every now and then. Yeah, I definitely have a heart for the people.
Do you see yourself in that type of ministry at any time in the future, or do you not have a real clear direction?
I don't know. As far as right now, like I would have had the opportunity to go again sometime now. This past winter, but I didn't. I felt that I needed to stay around here. We've got 3 children and
fresh business
and fresh business, and we moved, and there's so much work to do on the property, and I mean there's a lot of labor in the church, and being involved with the local things that we're involved with. Like my wife and I are both pretty involved now with the Encounter Ministry.
Right, it's coming right up again.
Yeah. There's one coming up in about 3 weeks now for the men, and a few weeks after that for the women. So
I don't want to get into it too much because that's not really the topic of this conversation. But I've heard some mixed reviews. I've heard a lot of good fruit, like yourself and John Fair and George Giesbrecht and many others that I've heard like really good things happening from Men's Encounter. But there's a lot of mixed reviews about it because people don't know really what happens there. It's a little bit mysterious. It's kind of supposed to be a little bit quiet because when the people come, it's supposed to be new to them, right? It's supposed to be interesting and kind of take them off guard in a sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you get the questions a lot about secrets that are going on at the Encounter. If you want to know what it's like,
come and check it out.
Come and check it out.
I've heard enough about it now to know that it's not like it's secretive. It's just we want the people to come and be genuinely blessed by what the revelation of who God's love.
If you were going to read a book or watch a movie and I told you the whole thing in 5 minutes, what happens?
It ruins a little bit of it.
It kind of ruins it, right? It kind of ruins it because you're gonna be watching this movie or reading this book with these few key points that I would have given you, right? You're going to be watching for these things to come to pass, and you're probably going to miss a lot of the other things because all you're doing is watching for these things I told you about. So, I think if it was completely laid out to you where you got to, let's say, live stream a whole weekend of Men's Encounter, the only thing you would have gotten is a watered down version of it, and it wouldn't have the same effect if you would go attend afterwards. Yeah, not that I advocate for that. I feel everybody needs to be put through that ringer, but it definitely is. If someone's looking for answers, and they just want to have some time away to connect with God and just to feel things out. The part that in your own life,
the part that has excited me about it so far, the little bit that I know of it, is that it's been a way for hardcore, staunch old colony men who are kind of wondering maybe there is something else they sometimes seem to go to that before they'd go to much anything else, which is surprising because it's a big deal. Like I know I've talked to guys like Corny Penner, and it's like it's very controversial to go there,
Yeah.
and they end up with trouble wherever they go after that. But
That's
for
right.
some reason, a lot of Dicha are open to going to it, and then men are hearing the gospel.
Yes, and I can see why people would be open to going to that in a sense, because there's up to 20, 30 different churches. We have people from Texas, from Alberta, from Paraguay, from Bolivia, from Mexico, from anywhere that would come. There's guys that go from here and they'll go out and serve in other places too, that can travel for that. I haven't been fortunate enough yet to be able to make it work to travel. I've always wanted to go to Mexico and serve at an encounter there too. But they don't represent one church, one denomination, representing Christ.
Yeah.
That Christ is the focus there. Free from the past is kind of the slogan for that. To be able to be cut off from sin, and to have your past buried and left behind, right? And to be able to walk free from there. So there's accountability that comes afterwards too. Yeah, once you've attended it.
The one bit of criticism that I've heard from people who actually do really appreciate it, and maybe this isn't always the case, but they find that a lot of people get some kind of freedom there, whether it's psychological or genuinely through the gospel. And then after that, they're kind of left like, okay, now what? What do I do? Where do I go? So if they don't have a good, strong local church somewhere that they go to and get teaching from, then sometimes they're left hanging, right?
Exactly. And a lot of people are contemplating going, but I don't want to get involved with a different church. Okay, this is not a church. It's not represented by any one denomination. And it does make people more open. It's, you go to a conference where there's English speaking people, it's majority Deitch
around here anyway. Yeah,
around here, but yeah, it does open people up definitely to come and check it out, because there's Old Colony, there's this and there's that, and there's so many other
for sure
people there where you don't need to necessarily feel like an outsider. Almost guaranteed, if you go, you're gonna know at least a handful of people that are there, either that are serving or that are attending for a first time. So
very nice. Any other big thing you had wanted to touch on that you thought was very, very relevant to your story?
I'd say just hang in there. Definitely with the encounter coming up, it's always a big deal to me, preparing for that, and it always makes me feel very, very small when I get to go and be a part of, Christ being represented,
and maybe changing someone's life forever.
and being having the opportunity to watch lives turn around, to watch people be transformed. It's a very big deal to me. And even just with this coming up that I was going to come and share with you here today, it was just as these things are coming up and they're drawing closer, I felt like I was under attack.
Yep.
I was under attack. There's all kinds of little things that are just trying to set you off towards your wife, your children. Just being quick to speak and not being quite who you feel you should be, and it has a tendency to make you feel like you're falling far short. I think what's important is to recognize and to acknowledge that, and even though it's not easy, and I feel like I fall into this over and over, where you feel like you're being targeted by the enemy, because there's a great work that God is going to let you be a part of, or that He wants to execute through you partially, right? For me, it's not easy, but there's a sense of peace when I feel when I can look back on my past few days, and I can just see over and over and over just darts that are hurled at me. There's a sense of peace that settles. Then it's not a comfortable place to be, but there's a sense of peace, because you know that you are onto something that the devil absolutely hates. Because if you were being selfish with your time, with your gifts,
why would he come after you?
Then he's got you where he wants you. He wants you to be selfish, to love yourself. and to be full of yourself. He wants that. And when he starts seeing the patterns of sacrifice, of giving yourself to the benefit of someone else,
where you might have the potential to influence someone else into the kingdom.
Yeah.
Then they're like,
he'll always make you
quick, like, oh, here's someone I need to get down.
Make you feel less than, or try to implant doubt into your mind.
Yeah.
So
no, that's cool.
That's one of the ways that I've been able to recognize somewhat whether or not I'm onto something that God is, that's pleasing to God and that is going to benefit. I feel like every time I have something that God can do through me to bless someone or to benefit them, especially when these trials come, the things that try to nullify that or to make you feel inadequate. I mean, out of myself, I am not adequate. I have nothing good to bring, right? It's only the work of Christ. So just to put yourself out there and to be a vessel through which he can work. Definitely, I feel like I have to always work to remind myself.
I've done several teachings on marriage, and it seems like in particular when I have to talk on marriage, I love doing it. There's usually a trial for my wife and I right around that time where it's like, oh, here it goes again, right? Like here I am teaching others to do marriage, and we're struggling. We got this difficult thing to work through. But it's just one more little trial to overcome, right?
Yeah, and it really, what really helps is if you can instill in your mind, I know for myself, that those trials, they're not problems. If you can look at it as an opportunity rather than a problem. Right? This is another opportunity for a victory with the help of Christ. It's another opportunity for a victory. And when that victory becomes a victory, or when that case becomes a victory in the name of Christ, then that's another testimony, or it's another page in the book, right? That's just another testimony. Every time victory comes through, then that's another testimony, and that's what it really should be always about, right? I mean, when you look at it one way, trials come, you can let the trial have its way and pull you under.
Let patience have her perfect work.
Yeah. So you can either lose, or you can claim the victory and have it be added to you as a part of your testimony, right? So.
Yes, sir. Right on. So I appreciate you coming around and sharing your story. If anybody that's tuned in, if you're in the Elmer, Stratfordville area and you need tires, check out Henry's his business just outside of Stratfordville. What's the business name?
I'm still running under the construction name, but we should have a new name. Which
is?
Destino Construction.
Destino Construction.
Yeah.
Do you have the new name already or no?
We don't. I was going to have it for the beginning of the year, and now I'm going to have it, try to, for the beginning of the year. If God doesn't change what we're doing there, He's going to continue to bless it, then it's something that I always had a passion for, just to be involved with community. All these things like volunteer.
It is a really good way to connect
volunteer firefighting and all these things has always been something that interests me, like to be part of community and to be active and not to be popular, but just to know what's going on and to just be involved.
We can minister with our business also.
People's lives, and that definitely I feel I've had the Lord's blessing with that. One thing I've always got to work on. It's actually a little quote that hangs on our fridge. It says, "Enough is as good as a feast," and to not pursue business for personal gain, but to use, even when it costs you money or time or whatever. But if you can bless somebody with that, it always comes back.
And it does bless you financially, typically too.
It does. It comes after. It comes after. It's a test of faith, and it comes after. So that's for sure. It's to do business as with a mindset that it's a gateway to minister to people,
to cause human flourishing.
Yeah, exactly. That has been the key, I feel like, for making it successful. And by successful, not by becoming the next millionaire or anything. Not in our case. We're getting by. We're eating every day.
Feasting.
We are feasting because we have enough, right? We have enough. God's grace abounds. His providence abounds every single day. And that's what I want it to be all about. I feel like sometimes I have to do some self-checks and readjust my motives, because they tend to shift without you knowing, right?
Right on. Well, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
God bless you.